Welcome back to Categorical Imperatives. I am your host today, Lockean Liberal, and I do want to thank you all so much for joining me here today. If you are new to this program, I especially want to welcome you. This is a podcast where we're going to be using legal theory and moral philosophy to discuss current events related to law, politics, and culture. And today I've got a really interesting episode for you. I just got finished doing an interview with the great Scott Horton. We are going to be talking about the Afghanistan war. I know I've certainly kind of had trouble making sense out of all the chaos that's been going on in just both in the world and sort of in the reporting on it. And so Scott is the guy who literally wrote the book on the war in Afghanistan. That's Fool's Errand, Timed in the War in Afghanistan, which is a must-read if you haven't read it before. But the point being, he is the perfect person to hopefully help me get a little clarity, and if you needed to help you get a little clarity too on what to make of all of this. So, without further ado, here is my interview with Scott. All right, hey, greetings, and welcome back to Categorical Imperatives. I am joined today by Scott Horton. He has been kind enough to come on and give me some of his time to talk about everything that's been going on in Afghanistan, hopefully try and help me and help other people make some sense out of it. I mean, he's the guy who literally wrote the book on the thing, so it's no better person to talk to. So anyways, yeah, Scott, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Cool. And Scott is the founder of the Libertarian Institute, managing editor of antiwar.com, the author of Fool's Errand and Enough Already, and you do the Scott Horton Show on scotthorton.org. Is that kind of everything?
Yeah, I think that's it. Did you say antiwar.com? I'm the editorial director of antiwar.com.
Cool. Yeah, I got that. So, and then there will be links to all of those sites down in this video's description. So, yeah, definitely go check those out. It seems so lopsided the way that 99% of everything is being focused on criticism and just completely attacking Biden. And I don't know. It just, am I letting him off too easy here, or are people really overreacting to what is really kind of some fairly minor problems?
Yeah, I mean, mostly I agree with you. They certainly screwed up, right? If you want to narrow the entire question down to how they left, they should not have canceled the deal and kicked the can down the road for a few months the way that they did. They should have stuck by the deal to get out by May. And Biden's first day in office, the night of the 20th, he should have called the Pentagon and said, we're sticking with the deadline, out by May. You heard me, and I'm not changing my mind now. Do work. And he didn't do that. And the
No.
Pentagon was trying to slow roll it because they wanted to talk him into changing his mind. And he should have let it be known right then. But instead, for, I guess, political reasons, they didn't want it to be Trump's withdrawal. They wanted it to be Biden's withdrawal. And so
Yeah.
he kicked the can down the road. But that just meant that they were giving away that decent interval where they have time to get out before the Taliban takes over the whole country. And then they also were believing all of their own BS about the strength of the Afghan army and its willingness and ability to fight and hold off the Taliban for, at least as they were putting it a few weeks ago, for a few months, at least maybe till the end of the year or something. They'll hold on to Kabul. So
Yeah.
because of that, they left a bunch of equipment behind for the Afghan National Army that ended up all falling into the hands of the Taliban. And they pulled out all the troops from, for example, the Bagram Air Base, while they still had, 3,000 civilians working at the embassy and in various capacities in the capital city there. And
Yeah.
then they say 15,000, but I don't believe it. But some other greater number of Americans spread throughout the country in other places and acting in private or contractor type capacities and that kind of thing. So would it have made more sense to just say the ANA is a joke? It cannot stand. We're not betting that it can stand. And we're going to destroy all these trucks or bring them all home and all the
Yeah.
light arms and all the rest that we left them. And we're going to get all of our civilians out. And on the last flight out will be armed soldiers who can protect and provide force protection for themselves all the way out the door. That would have
Right.
made a lot more sense. Instead, they really set themselves up to look like a bunch of stupid idiots here in
Hmm.
the way that they handled it. However, the real point is that in the scheme of things, well, two things. Even with the Taliban taking over the country
Which was
and
going to
taking
happen
over the
anyway.
capital city, what?
Which was going to happen anyway, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, but
The
the point
takeover.
is, when they took over Kabul, they didn't start murdering everybody,
Right.
right? And they didn't bomb and machine gun and mortar our guys, on the way from the embassy to the airport. When Saigon fell, it was bitter fighting all the way to the very end. When people are,
Hmm.
trying to climb on that Huey, they can hear machine gun fire in the not too far distance, a couple of blocks away.
Yeah.
That was a real panic, a bitter fighting to the very end of the thing. In this case, it was a coup de main where the Taliban just took over the whole damn place in a surprise attack that in some cases amounted to not even an attack. And just as I had predicted for years, they just walked right into Kabul. They didn't even invade it or lay siege to it. They just walked right in and took over the thing. And they've stuck with their side of the ceasefire and not attacked and killed American soldiers and American, government employee civilians on their way out of the country there.
Right.
And so that's important to note that people were afraid that this would be like ISIS taking over and it would be total chaos, but it's really not total chaos. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is that this entire war has been a catastrophe. And
Right.
so, of course, the end of it is also a bungled, ridiculous, haphazard mess. What did you expect? 20 years of catastrophe tied up with a neat little bow at the end? Of course, everything looks like hell on the way out. This is the best they can do, folks. This is
Right.
the thing. The counterfactual I just explained for how they could have done it instead. Well, our Secretary of Defense and his men couldn't think of that, couldn't handle that right. This is the best they can do. It's part of how they lost the whole damn war.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Um. But yeah, has there been anything as far as like the civilians left behind? I mean, is there any like reason that people are panicking except that they're afraid of what they're imagining might happen? Or I mean, is there
I
really
don't
any?
think so. No, I think that's right. And look,
Okay.
if you have a friend who's, down in Ghazni and you're wondering whether he's going to be able to get to Kabul and get on a plane and get out of there, you might be really worried about him. However, and I'm behind. I have not caught up on, all the latest news as of the last, 12 hours or whatever. But I
Yeah.
haven't seen reports of that. And there have been reports very like vague and as far as I can tell unconfirmed reports that Americans are being prevented from getting to Kabul. But at the same time, the Taliban has said that they guarantee total amnesty to all former government employees. And of course,
Yeah.
they'll protect all Americans trying to get out of the country, trying to travel across the country to get out of the country. That they don't want any trouble with anybody. And so, something that happens a lot is you look at enemies in war and or not even in war, but just leaders of foreign countries, and
Yeah.
oftentimes they are ruthless killers. But that does not mean that they are like irrational, crazy people like Charles Manson in the lockup or something like that.
Right.
They are
Right. Right.
ruthless. They make ruthless decisions, but that doesn't mean that they're irrational. And the Taliban, frankly, oftentimes make very bad decisions when they could have done one thing smart for their own interests. They do something entirely different. But in this case, they seem to be more clever than cruel. And they're saying, listen, it's in our interests to get off on the right foot with the international community, such as it is, the other major powers of the world, by once they establish a new government and take over and control the government there, to not make themselves an immediate pariah by going after the civilian government employees of anybody's country, any embassy employees of any country in their country that now their country.
Now,
It's
yeah.
not in their interest to do that. And so I'm not saying we can trust them, but I'm just
Well,
saying
no, of
there's no
course.
reason to really believe that they're just going to act out their revenge fantasies and murder Americans who are trying to get the hell out of their country, which is what the Taliban always said was all they ever wanted.
Right. Yeah, and I was really surprised. I saw this footage of them walking into town, and I, from what it looks like to me, that they kind of went into the airbase and to the Afghan army that was there. They were just like, "Hey, look, if you guys just surrender, put down your arms, leave peacefully, we'll let you be." And I mean, it looked like they were really doing that, like just letting people go in peace as long as they didn't
Yeah.
fight, which is
Which is
yeah,
Yeah,
really
smart public
encouraging.
relations for them, right? I mean, this is a big part of how they took over the whole country. Imagine if the first few military bases that they seized, they had taken all the infantry out back and shot them, right? They'd have had a much harder time at the next base.
Right.
Instead, it was base after base after base. They were telling people, look, put down your rifle and go home,
Hmm.
and not even taking them to jail, much less executing them. And they did execute a few commanders and whatever. I'm not saying it's been beautiful, but I'm just saying
No, for
they were
sure.
smart to take over the country essentially with handshakes and not through bitter fighting.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure they understand that we're still hawkish enough that I mean, any acting up could have brought the troops back, or I mean, could still if they really started acting up too. I don't know. I mean, they have to understand that. I would think.
Well, there's zero chance America is going to try to roust them out of power in Kabul now and try to again to do a regime change and create a new government there. But you're right, certainly that they could carpet bomb them with B-52s. You know,
Right.
they could I guess in the worst case scenario, they could send in Marines to go and engage them in ground fighting to punish them for this, that, or the other thing. But I think the Taliban know too that those days are over. If America's going back to Afghanistan after this, well, there's a chance that they're going to try to side with Masood's son and Mohammed Noor and Mohammed Atta Noor and some of these other guys in the Panjshir Valley. But I don't
Yeah.
expect that to last. I think the Taliban's going to take over that last redoubt here, relatively quickly. So I don't see much space there for the CIA or anybody to continue to back those guys against the Taliban. I'm much
Yeah.
more concerned that they're going to go ahead and ally with the Taliban, and it'll be in the name of
Our
keeping
government is, you
ISIS
mean?
out. Huh?
Our government will ally with the Taliban. You're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, in the name of fighting ISIS, and in the name, well, and covertly it wouldn't be in the name of anything, but in order to support the East Turkestan Islamic Movement, ETIM they call it, which is essentially separatist Uyghurs who are allied with the Taliban, who the Americans, bombed there in 2018
Oh yeah.
at a joint Taliban ETIM base there in far northeastern Afghanistan. So, they could try to, turn it around and say, you know what, actually, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, or the friend of the guy I want to train against my enemy is not so bad.
Right. Yeah.
However you phrase it.
So yeah, I guess kind of touching on the idea of us just not going back. You're not seeing any possibility of that. Another thing I kind of wanted to ask you about is what I seem to be seeing from people just like in the news and in general. There's very much that same sort of like shame and demoralization that happened with the Vietnam syndrome. And what I'm wondering is, do you think, because this is kind of a different age, like we don't really have to, we wouldn't really have a problem of them trying to start new wars, with with Middle Easterners the way that they were doing with the communist nations. But do you think that there could be like a new sort of Vietnam syndrome where we start really kind of getting fed up and not putting up with some of the other wars we're fighting right now that are really pointless? I mean, do you see anything like that happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's already happened. It happened really as a result of Iraq War II. That was such a disaster. And
Yeah.
they sold it so hard for it to then turn into such a catastrophe. And then even when they finally left, they sort of thought that they had won, but they hadn't won anything. They had fought for the winning side, but then the winning side told them, now beat it, get the hell out. And you don't get anything. You don't get one base. You don't get one drop of oil. Go to hell. So then they
Yeah.
left. And then a couple years after that, ISIS took over the whole west of the country. And so, just from a very, like, even just half informed kind of general public or, Army infantry veteran point of view, what the hell was that all for?
Right.
We gave everything we got in Ramadi, and then a couple of years later, you got bin Ladenites rule the entire west of the country. They were part of the insurgency. Now they're the dominant force in the whole thing just a few years later. So there was a lot of, I think, just giving up there. What the hell is the point of all of this? And you know what?
Yeah.
Honestly, man, you're too young probably to remember this, but in the early Bush years, I mean, it was like, oh man, you know how they treat Dr. Fauci like infallible or whatever. It was like
Yeah.
that, only way more. It was way worse about George W. Bush and his whole
Oh yeah.
government. There's never been a more competent and intelligent and capable and rational and well-intentioned group of administrators ever. Meet
Yeah.
Bush and Cheney and Rice and Powell and Tenet. And this group, they know what to do. Tom Ridge at Homeland Security, he's our great leader. Where it was like
Yeah.
Starship Troopers, only without the satire. They just meant it. It was really like that, and that didn't
Yeah.
break until Hurricane Katrina. In fact, you'll see
That's
right
right.
wingers
Yeah.
complain, yeah, the media was always out to get W. Bush. No, they weren't. The media was always out to force us to worship George W. Bush, to
Mm-hmm.
never question George W. Bush until 2 years into the Iraq War. And then it wasn't even Iraq. It was when Katrina drowned New Orleans and the national government sat there doing nothing about it for 5, 6 straight days while everyone on TV screaming their heads off, crying about it, and all the rest of that. And only finally then did the consensus change to, actually, George Bush is a stupid piece of crap. He doesn't
Right.
know anything. And Dick Cheney is a corrupt, mean, venal, hateful, torturous old piece of crap. And while it turns out these neoconservatives, they're hardly Americans at all. They're all here to serve the interests of Israel at the
Right.
expense of the American people. And Condoleezza Rice, it's amazing she can read and write. She didn't know the first thing about what the hell she's doing up there. And then that was it. So the consensus finally broke later. And then ever since then, it's been downhill. I mean, I got to tell you, man,
Yeah.
it's been 10 years, 9 years since the polls had it that super majorities of the American people were against the war in Afghanistan. It's been since, the height of the surge, most Americans have been for pulling out of there. At
Yeah.
least, maybe even from before that.
Well, yeah. I mean, that was only ever supposed to be go in, get Bin Laden, take care of him, and get out. I mean, it wasn't supposed to be
That's what
any
people
of this
thought.
nation building. Yeah.
Yep.
So.
It's the same thing in Iraq. I'll never forget the lady in my cab. I don't think she must have tipped me. The lady in my cab saying, well, I say we go get Saddam and get out. And I say to her, well, look, I mean, it's not like it's your responsibility because they don't care what you think really anyway. But,
Right.
that's kind of not what's being sold here, right? The choices are go to Iraq and stay and expand America's military footprint and build 50 bases and colonize the damn place, at least militarily, and change the map of the Middle East forever. Or don't. But
Right.
go in and get Saddam and get out. That's not even one of the options up for discussion here at all.
No, not
There's
at
no
all.
one has even proposed that. And then she says to me, well, that's what I say. I say go in there and get him and get out. And it's like, and I probably did keep arguing with her that, like,
Yeah.
yeah, but what you're doing is you're giving them permission to do what it is that they want, not what it is that you want them to do. You imagine this narrow scenario. And then, of course, the joke is she didn't have any power. It doesn't matter what she thought anyway. But still,
Right.
just you can
Exactly.
see
Yeah.
how people just rationalize it. Like if I told her, well, I did tell her, look, they say they're going to remake the whole country. They're going to do all of this stuff and remake Iraq in this whole separate place. That would never make sense. That didn't make sense to her. That was why she said, look, they've successfully convinced me of how bad this guy is. He's got to be killed.
Right.
But she couldn't imagine that any rational person would want to bite off more than that in Iraq. You tell me the mission is more than getting him and get out? Well, I'm against that. That doesn't make any sense at all. Still, she was in favor of starting the war, though.
Oh, for sure.
But still, you
And
understand what I mean.
but yeah, definitely. And yeah, I'm old enough to remember that there was I'd heard it referred to as kind of like the other PC culture, the patriotic correctness, where it's just like it is not okay to question your government. It's it's these wars are good. You just need to trust us. We're fighting them for a good reason. Just kind of shut up and sit back, and we got things handled. Uh, yeah, really really weird time. Um, so let's see. I got kind of a two part question I wanted to ask you here. It's, I guess the first part I'll ask you first is there anything about the end of the war and the withdrawal that has been going on and is going on that you think is really important that should be talked about and that is not getting its due in the media, and anything that people should be taking to mind that they're just simply not hearing?
Sure. Well, in fact, I just wrote a new article today um, because so when I was at Freedom Fest in South Dakota a few weeks ago, I did an interview with C-SPAN for Book TV, and today they put out a tweet promoting it. But they also it was a video with a montage of me and two or three other authors with short clips of us talking. And the clip before me is Peter Bergen, and I don't think he's probably thinking about me, although maybe he is. But he said, there are some people out there now who more and more are promoting the theory that bin Laden was trying to get us to invade Afghanistan, to bog us down and bleed us to bankruptcy, like he said in the 2004 speech.
Right.
But
Yeah.
Peter Bergen says, but that's not true. That's just an after the fact rationalization. Bin Laden was trying to get us to be scared and run away. And
Mm,
and then after we didn't and we went big instead, then this is how he excused it after the fact by saying, well, that was his plan all along. But well, that just ain't right. And so I've got a few different evidences collected from the 1990s, from before September 11th, where he said this, or at least right at the time. So
yeah.
I have his interviews with Abdel Bari Atwan, who wrote The Secret History of Al Qaeda, who is the editor of Al Quds Al Arabi newspaper in London, who interviewed bin Laden in 1996, where he explained all of this and where he explained outright that's what he's trying to do, is get us to invade Afghanistan. And then he also said he complains that after Black Hawk Down, Bill Clinton withdrew from Somalia when he was hoping for a war of attrition against us there. That was what he called it, a war of attrition against us in Somalia. And then you have the Wall Street Journal reporter, Alan Cullison, got his hands on an Al Qaeda hard drive, or maybe it was a Taliban hard drive that had emails from Al Qaeda guys on it. One or the other, I forget now. But in there is a letter from bin Laden to Mullah Omar saying, oh, Your Highness, geez, I love you. So sorry for getting you into such trouble, but it's worth it. Trust me. And here's why. And he explains the position that he's put us in. We can either turn tail and run now, which will make us look weak and pathetic and undermine our empire, or we can invade and they'll bog us down and break us on the rocks of Afghanistan. We'll have to withdraw in humiliating defeat, just like the Russians, which would be the long way and the hard way of achieving the very same end. That's what bin Laden
Right.
told Mullah Omar. And then we have his son, Omar, who I guess he named after Mullah Omar. I don't know. Maybe
Maybe.
not.
Yeah. Who knows?
No, he would have been younger. He would have been younger than that. Or sorry, too old for that. Anyway, but anyway, so I mean, pardon me, the son Omar bin Laden gave an interview to Rolling Stone magazine in 2010, where he says my father's plan was to replicate his war against the Russians. He would do to the United States exactly what he'd done to the Russians in the 1980s, which was bog them down and break their economy. And look at all the money you've spent in invading Afghanistan. It's just like what he was trying to do. And you can tell from the way he says this. There's no after the fact rationalization by bin Laden's PR man. This is just his son saying, look, this is what my dad told me in the summer before the attack, that this is what he was trying to accomplish with the attack. And then there's a brand new piece of evidence that just came out in June, which is a story about Judith Miller, who's the infamous reporter from the New York Times who lied us into war with Iraq with all the weapons of mass destruction tall tales, and was very close with the neoconservatives and all that. Yeah. Well, she has a new story. It's verified by her New York Times editor for some new podcast they're doing or something over at Slate. And they talk about how they had a story about an Al-Qaeda intercept that they could have run in the summer of 2001. You can find it. The story is called "Could the New York Times Have Prevented 9/11?" is the title at Slate. And they have a quote in there. Here was the intercept they had. 2 Al-Qaeda guys on the phone. And the one Al-Qaeda guy says, it really sucks that we weren't able to provoke America into invading Afghanistan when we blew up the USS Cole in the year 2000. And the other one says, don't worry. When the new attack happens here real soon, there's no way they'll be able to withstand the temptation then. We'll definitely get a reaction and an invasion out of them then. And so that makes it clear it's not just bin Laden. This had all filtered down to his men, that they talked about it on the phone, that how is our project to provoke America into doing something big and stupid going? Well, it's not going as well as we'd liked, but hold on to your hats because here comes the big one. That's the way they all talked about this. And so that's my new article for today. And I think that's one of the most important, narratives of this entire war on terrorism era, that, where they thought that they were taking advantage. That was what bin Laden wanted them to do, take advantage. So they were being cynical, horrible advantage takers, but they were also being total suckers for the enemy and carrying out bin Laden's plan. And then, so if that's right, and it is, that was what they're trying to get us to do in Afghanistan, then that means that then going to Iraq and going to Libya and Syria and Somalia and Yemen is beyond bin Laden's wildest dreams. As Atwan said, Iraq was his dream come true. So, the rest of them, absolutely. And of course, as I know, in Libya, Syria, and Yemen, because it's after Iraq War II, you got us fighting on the side of Al-Qaeda, not just in a way that indirectly benefits them, but directly for their benefit in all 3 of those wars ongoing.
And I never quite thought about it that way before, that, the way we went in was even like a bigger victory than he could have even hoped for. That's kind of a really interesting point.
Yep, absolutely right.
Yeah.
Michael Scheuer, who was the chief of the CIA's bin Laden unit, said the Iraq war was the hoped for but unexpected gift to bin Laden against the socialist infidel, Saddam Hussein. That's what bin Laden called him, the socialist infidel. And then, of course,
Clark kind of warning about that too.
Yeah, look, everybody...
A lot of people, I guess.
A lot of people, Colleen Rowley became famous as the FBI lawyer whistleblower whose team could have probably stopped 9/11 if they were allowed to pursue the investigation of Zacharias Moussaoui, who wanted to learn how to fly a plane, but not so interested in how to take off or land the thing. And when she came out in public, in her big letter to the Senate in May of 2002, one of the big things in there was, you better not invade Iraq, man. And she knew about Al-Qaeda, and she said, this is going to be an absolute catastrophe for our counterterrorism efforts. This is going to make the bad guys look so right about us. The government was saying, oh no, this is going to prove that we love Muslims and Arabs so much that they should never attack us. Yeah, really, by killing tens and hundreds of thousands of them, huh?
Yeah, it's a funny way to show love.
Yeah, there are plenty of people who warned against it. And now look, I have the quotes in both books. I think in both books. They're a little bit redundant there in the chapter 1, where Paul Wolfowitz explained this is one of the primary reasons that they wanted to invade Iraq, was to get American bases out of Saudi Arabia, where they were provoking Al-Qaeda to attack us. And so what we're going to do, we're going to invade Iraq. That way we can move all those bases out of Saudi and into Iraq, which, yeah, no one will mind that. That'll be just fine, right? Don't worry about that. But,
Right. Yeah.
this was their thinking. These guys are out to get us, and we got to find a way to, undermine it. And the smart way, right? Not let's invade Afghanistan forever, but let's get our bases out of Saudi. But then, of course, that just became the excuse for the next war, even worse.
Right. For sure.
Oh, shit. I got to go, man. I'm sorry. I got another interview.
Okay. No, that's perfect. All right. Thank you so much for your time, Scott.
Absolutely. Good to talk to you again.
Yeah. You too. Take care. So, unfortunately, we had to finish the interview a little more abruptly than I would have hoped to. But I had a wonderful time talking to Scott all the same. I hope that you had a good time listening to the conversation. Hope you got a little something out of it, learned a little something. I'm sure you did. You've always got to learn something when you listen to Scott in just about any situation. So, anyways, I just want to remind you guys again that Scott can be found over at the Libertarian Institute at antiwar.com, and he does the Scott Horton Show, which you can find over at scotthorton.org. If you haven't read his books, Fool's Errand and Enough Already, you gotta read those books. I could not recommend them highly enough, so I'll make sure to put links in the description to either to his site or to Amazon or somewhere where you can go and find the book very easy and go buy it and go support Scott as you should, as he deserves. So, yeah. Anyways, I want to thank him once more for giving me his time, for coming on the show, and to thank you for sticking around and listening to what we had to say. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked the episode, go on and hit that old thumbs up button there. If you disliked the episode, you can go ahead and hit that thumbs down button, although I'm sure no one will do that. And please leave me a comment if you have any thoughts on the show. I do really always love to hear from you guys in the comments and get your thoughts on just whatever. So, yeah, I guess all that is left to say is that this has been me, Lockean Liberal, for Categorical Imperatives, talking about the end of the war in Afghanistan, and of course, as always, Delenda es Casago.